Welcome to week 4. This week we are focused on a not always exciting part of community archives, but a very important part of it. Collection development could be its own 1 credit, 5-week course, so I'm going to focus on this content on a very high level. You will need policies and procedures to guide your community archive, but these policies and procedures need to be adaptable and flexible based on community feedback and needs. While much of what is presented is a standard approach in policies and procedures, consider how community archives may deviate from and adapt different policies and procedures from the ones that are presented. This week, we are going to talk about different policies and procedures that might be used within a community archive. Effective policies and procedures are critical to managing collections and can help maintain trust within the community. As we talked about last week, the materials within a community archive must be represented the way a community wants them to be. This means that community representatives need to be involved in writing policies around the collections and their access. Communication must remain open as policies may change over time depending on community needs. So, what is a collection policy? In its most basic state, it is a detailed written statement that explains why a collecting institution is in operation and how it goes about its business. The policy articulates the institution's standards regarding materials left in its care and serves as a guide for the caretakers of the materials and is a source of information for the public. It contains a lot of information. A good policy will cover a broad range of topics. A policy usually has an introduction section with an institution's mission, statement, and statement of purpose, institution's history, legal status, governing structure, and staffing information, a vision statement that articulates the community archive's future goals, description and scope of the collection, such as what is collected and what is not collected, a collecting plan that is a vision for the collection and what it would ideally look like, and the institution's code of ethics. It will also have an acquisition section. This section will cover the method of collecting materials, the collecting scope, criteria for acquisition to the collection, who has authority to accept acquisitions, who is responsible for processing acquisitions, and any associated procedures. There will also be a deaccession section. This outlines the formal process for removing materials from the collection, the criteria for removal, who has the authority to make the decisions, the disposal methods, restrictions on deaccessioning, and any associated procedures. There will also be a loan section, which will include information on temporary transfer of possession of property for a specific purpose without a transfer of title. Information on incoming and outgoing loans, reasons for a loan, criteria and restrictions around the loan, who has the authority to approve the loans, standards of care for borrowed or loaned objects, responsibilities to managed loans, and any associated procedures. The access and use section is the flip side of preservation. There is this natural tension between preservation and use, which must be balanced to fulfill the mission of the community archive. This will include information on types of access and use, including direct and indirect use, who is allowed direct use internally and externally, and what restrictions on access there are, criteria for access, and if there are fees or protocols around that, the responsibilities for managing access, and the associated procedures. The collections care and records section will include assignment of responsibility for collections care and record keeping, cataloging, inventory, and tracking locations and condition reporting, storage requirements, handling, display, packing, and shipping requirements, object labeling requirements, and any associated procedures and forms. The risk management and insurance section will include insurance information for collections, insurance for loans, security for the collection and handling repository, disaster preparedness for the collection, and who has the authority to make decisions deviating from risk management policies, along with any associated procedures. A good collections management policy is a form of risk management. Every institution will be different. There is no one-size-fits-all collection policy. Every institution has a unique mission, collection, history, structure, etc., that raises different collection policy, legal, and ethical issues. Policy guidelines should be crafted to meet the needs of each institution, its collection, and its community needs. Policies and procedures are different. Procedures are steps to enact or carry out policies, which are usually provided at a higher community, broad, or governing level. The procedures can be developed at a staff or similar position level. Procedures are detailed instructions that specify how to apply the policies in day-to-day activities. You can see some examples on the slide. Policies and procedures are incredibly important to collection management. However, these policies and procedures have contributed to systemic problems within collecting institutions. As we continue to learn and think about community archives, we want to be aware of the necessary shift that needs to occur around the concepts of possession, ownership, and stewardship of collections. We must make sure policies and procedures are well thought out and adopt the values and commitment of a community's needs. Institutions around the world are reckoning with methods and means by which they have acquired their collections and how these practices have impacted communities worldwide. We have a responsibility to respectfully engage, consult, and work collaboratively with communities at all levels of our work, including policies, procedures, and collection management. Institutions in more recent history have adopted new policies and procedures, such as following obligations under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, also known as NAGPRA. Additionally, policies around shared stewardship and ethical returns have been adopted. These policies acknowledge that ethical norms and professional best practices in collecting have changed. It allows institutions to return collections in appropriate circumstances based on ethical considerations, including the manner in which the collection was originally acquired and the context of its acquisition. In 2008, when I was working as a curator at a local history center on the Chicago's North Shore, I received a call from the director of Shorefront Legacy Center. Shorefront is a community archive located in Evanston, Illinois, that collects, preserves, and shares the stories of Black individuals who have lived throughout Chicago's suburban North Shore. The director requested that an item from the center's collection be returned to the family who donated it so they could give the item to Shorefront. I had never been asked to do this before, so I sat down with my director and discussed it with her. She was irate that they'd even consider asking and declared that we had a legal right to the item. As I sat there listening to her, I began to consider whether there needed to be more flexibility in these policies. When the item requested was donated to our collection, the center was the only place that was telling any history of Evanston. With the founding of Shorefront, the family who donated the item felt it would be better suited at Shorefront. I spent a couple days working through some of my feelings about it and came back to my director to propose that we should deaccession the item and return it to the family so they could donate it to Shorefront. In addition, I also created what we now know today as an ethical considerations policy for the center's collections, which allowed for flexibility around the display, care, access, and disposition of materials within the center's care. I was very nervous about the meeting because in 2008, these considerations were not mainstream. They weren't really even discussed. I had to show her that it was a benefit for everyone. The meeting was a success, and the following month, the board approved an addition to the collections policy around ethical considerations, and the item was deaccessioned from our collection and given to Shorefront, where it was used in multiple exhibits. While we had policies and procedures that help us manage a community archive and the collection, we have to always keep an open mind, be flexible, and listen to our community members. These are living documents that will and need to change. This week, as in all weeks, you have several readings, a set of discussion prompts, and part of your community archives project plan to turn in. This week, in the project plan, please write 500 words about your collecting plan and how it will support and reflect your community archive identity and history. List and describe the types of materials you plan to collect. How do these materials reflect the identity and history of the community? What criteria will you use to determine what belongs in the archive? How will you involve the community in this decision-making process? Identify any challenges in developing the collection and how you plan to address them. As always, keep in touch with us if you need any help or any guidance to answer any of your questions. See you next week.